Hi, I'm Nicholas Seminario, founder of Dark Angel Company. This podcast is to share the untold stories of just a few of the many people battling mental illnesses in this world. If you're in need of a little inspiration to keep fighting or to feel less alone in your battle, keep listening and share to spread awareness. This is the Dark Angel Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Dark Angel Podcast. I hope everything is going well with you guys. I really appreciate the support that we've gotten over the last week or two. We've actually gotten a lot more downloads lately and things are trending upwards. So it's really, really exciting. I hope you guys like the new stuff that we're putting out. We're putting a lot of work into it. So please continue to share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. Today, I think we have a really important topic. It's something where I feel like it's not talked about enough, and it's something, in my opinion, we all experience. It's something I experience a lot. I bet it's something you experience. It's burning out. You know, feeling overwhelmed, feeling stressed, and I really want to hone in on that burnout feeling, right? This feeling of being overwhelmed and kind of overworked. You don't know what to do. Before we get into all the facts and the information that we have for you guys, I want to present you guys a little bit of a story. The reasoning I'm doing this episode is because one of my buddies the other night, I was on my way home from my girlfriend's, and it was about 11:45 at night, and we were on the phone, and I could just tell something was up. He was driving, and it was late. I was like, oh, it's not like him. He called me. So, we were talking, and I could just tell he's overwhelmed, right? He wasn't in the right headspace, and that's not like him. And I kind of realized, I was like, look, this is something we all go through, right? So it's not abnormal for someone to experience this, right? Whether you're super successful, unsuccessful, or you're lazy, you're hardworking, it's something everybody can experience. So to, further with the story, I was trying to get to the bottom of what was going on. So, he was just kind of going on about, he's like, I don't know if I want to be in New York. I don't love it here, but in the same breath, I don't know if I'm trying to get out of New York to kind of get away from my problems, or if, when I do take these vacations or these breaks, is it too much? He's our age. He's super successful, right? So it's it is lonely at the top, right? So that's an aspect of, what he's going through. And he's like, is it all worth it? I have one of my buddies telling me, they're going down to school in Tampa, and they're like, I don't know if I want to go to school, and my buddy, he was like, no, you really should, he's like, and then he's thinking to himself, should I have stuck with school? Was this the right choice? Because he's not going to school anymore. He's doing his business full time, which he's doing very well with, but he's like, at what cost, right? We wound up talking that night for 3 hours. We didn't go to bed until 2:30, 3 o'clock. He wound up coming to my house. I was on the phone with him. I was like, dude, why don't you just come over? We'll figure everything out. It's easier to talk in person. So we talked for about 30 minutes on the phone. He eventually came over, and we were just talking for 2 or 3 hours. And we got down to the bottom of it, and we figured out, it's a lot of it's stress. A lot of it's this pressure that we put on ourselves and being overworked, right? He's somebody who works 18-hour days, 6-7 days a week. He doesn't stop. Whether it's Christmas, New Year's, he's always going. Not that it caught up with him, but, our minds are these complex places where sometimes we think a lot, right? It's just our nature. That's what our brains do. And sometimes they have great thoughts and sometimes they have bad thoughts. And for him to have acknowledged this, I found that super important, right? I found it important that he was willing to talk to someone, right? He's somebody who's a super closed book. He's similar to you, right? You're somebody who doesn't like sharing your feelings. And I was proud of him for sharing it, right? He came up to me, he called me and he was like, look, he realized something was wrong, and he approached me, and, we talked through it, and we kind of came to a realization, not that everything was solved, but we talked it out and we kind of figured out what was going on. To get into, burnout, stress, being overwhelmed, there's two differences, right? Stress is having too much on your plate, right? This is when you have a job, you have school, you have homework, you have all these things piling on top of each other. So many responsibilities, and things are just not working out. You're spending so much time doing these things. Burnout is actually the opposite. You typically feel like you don't have enough motivation, you don't have enough energy, and you don't care enough. While stress is, I feel, in everybody's lives, right? And so is burnout, but they're two completely different things. Go ahead.
Do you think that they can exist at the same time, though?
Totally. I feel stress, at least for me, sometimes is a causer of burnout. So, stress is kind of like that precursor to burning out. So, you have all this work, all this schoolwork, and, then it comes time to write your essay and you're all burnt out, right? You don't have that motivation. You don't have that energy. There's different stages to a burnout, right? So something called the honeymoon phase. So the honeymoon phase is similar to in a marriage. It comes with energy and optimism, right? So you're all excited. Like, let's say at the start of school, right? You're getting ready for school. You're going into it.
So is this how burnout kind of takes place throughout like an activity?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So whether it's starting a new job, a task, whatever it is, and it's common, you're going to experience the satisfaction that leads to periods of productivity and the ability to tap into your creative side, right? So it's giving you this mobility and
sense of freshness.
Exactly, right? It's new.
Excitement.
Yes. Then you get to the next phase of the burnout, which is the stress phase, right? So it's once this honeymoon phase dwindles down, as time goes on, it becomes stressful, right? Now you're starting to worry about different things. Like, let's say if I like school as an example. I think that's an example everybody can understand, right? Once after those first few weeks are in, now all the hard work starts to start piling on. This is when that honeymoon phase starts to phase out and the stress phase starts to come in. You're going to start to lose focus more. You're going to be less productive and you're going to have less creative ideas just because of stress. It's overwhelming and it's harder to work under these conditions. The next phase is the chronic stress phase. This is where you become more persistent or chronic. And as the pressure, continues, you're more likely to consistently negatively affect your work, right? Your work's not going to be as good, right? Because you have all these stresses and all these pressures on you. Then as that happens, physical fatigue is going to start to set in, right? So now your body's going to start hurting more. Your mind's going to start hurting more. You're going to be more tired. You're going to be more achy. You're going to be, even sometimes you're going to be sick, right? Just because your body is in this distress mode. One of the later stages is now burnout stage, right? So this is where you reach your limit and you cannot function anymore. So this is when you'd be in your bedroom right after class, because you had to go to class, or even you're skipping class now. You're not doing any of your assignments. This is that burnout phase where you have no more motivation. You can't think anymore. You can't produce these creative ideas. And this is where that issue really starts to set in. You could be putting yourself in jeopardy if you continue on this path. There's sometimes people will pull themselves out of it, or sometimes it's the latter end and, you'll go into this bad situation and you kind of stick with it.
Kind of like a crash and burn at the end of it.
Exactly.
Everything just kind of feels like it falls apart.
Yes, exactly. Have you ever experienced something like this where it kind of started with this exact same trajectory and then it kind of phased out and burnt out?
I think burnout also comes from not only like the excessive stress, right? But sometimes you spend such a long time doing something, whether it just be day after day after day, like school, you're there 5 days a week and then you have homework on the weekends. You tend to lose interest because you kind of know exactly what's coming in a sense, and you just dread the responsibility of it. Or it's a lot too, and that's where that stress aspect comes in. But I've definitely experienced it in many different points throughout my life. How about you?
Yeah, totally. I feel like school, is an obvious answer. But I've also experienced it with doing this, where it's like, when I first started doing this, I think the first month I recorded 14 or 15 episodes in 1 month. I was completely burnt out, and then I think I wound up only doing 10 more episodes throughout the rest of the year. And, I did just as much in a year as I did in 1 month. So it was for me, it was so overwhelming that I was like, okay, I need to get these out. I need to get these out. I need to get these out. And it wound up putting so much stress and pressure on myself that I wound up burning out, and I wound up not recording one for like a month or two. I was still posting them because I recorded so many, but I would rather do it where it's consistent and, I'm staying on top of it and I don't burn out. So, now I've found that happy medium and I've figured out how to do that. But at the start, I was totally burning out. And I've done that with baseball. I've done that with school. I feel like I do it even just sometimes in life, right? Like sometimes life gets tiring and stressful.
Yeah, so I know with your habits sometimes, not habits, but hobbies, right? Sometimes you pick up a hobby for 6 to 8 months. Do you think it's because you burn yourself out of the hobby that you end up not like pursuing it after that amount of time?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Perfect example. When I got into chess, I was playing 8-10 hours a day for almost a year, right? For like 6 to 8 months. That's pretty much the perfect time range. And I just wound up getting burnt out from it. It was like it became a chore almost. So what I try and do, which is very hard for me because I do get obsessed with things and I do love them, and then I do get burnt out. So I try and space myself out with it, which is like with golf, how I got into golf. It's nice that there's those 3-4 months where I can't play because I'll still miss it in the spring, where it'll be like, oh, I missed this.
You have to create that draw to it again.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like chess or piano or, whatever it was. I became obsessed with physics in senior year. It was like I could do it whenever I wanted, right? So it was like now that I'm separated from it, it kind of gives me that
pull back to it.
Yeah, exactly, which is, I feel, necessary.
Do you think that's a way to combat burnout?
Yes.
Not necessarily by taking a step back, but by creating that draw to it again.
Yeah, I definitely do. And I think it's easier for some things than others, right? So it's like school, for people who don't like school, I feel like there's not much of a drawback, right? So if you're going to dislike school, what's there drawing you back? So I don't think that's always the answer, but I would say for things you dislike, I think the answer is kind of pushing yourself, and being conscious of those decisions. And to avoid that burnout, kind of apply it the same way, right? Instead of it being seasons that are kind of stopping me from playing, right? The winter, you can't play. So instead of doing that, maybe, a lot of college kids don't have class on Friday. So kind of designate a day like that to, obviously, like I said, you're not going to be drawn back to things you dislike, but to prevent from getting burnt out, try and lighten your load or do, I guess,
find things you enjoy.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Forget about everything else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like right now I'm taking 6 classes. So I'm taking 17 credits this semester. That's the most you can take without paying for more. So that's a lot. I'm also working, I'm doing this on top of it. So I'm doing a lot right now, right? So I can easily get burnt out from things. But to prevent that, those days that I don't want to push myself, I kind of don't. I'm just going to be honest. Like I don't push myself past that breaking point. I don't try and, if I'm not feeling up to it that day, if I don't want to do a piece of homework, like, look, I might not do it. I'm not saying that's the best thing to do, but that prevents me from getting burnt out and kind of being overwhelmed. So it's something where you kind of have to like step back and you look at it from a larger perspective and you say, okay, let me kind of break all this up. And, sometimes there's not enough time in the day to do everything. And that's kind of what I've come to realize, and I accept that. So if there's not enough time, I prioritize what's most important to me. And the things that are most important, I'm going to do first, and I'm going to get those done. The things that are less important, I'll probably do them later. And if I get to them, I get to them. If not, then I don't. Is this something where you've kind of got it down, or do you still experience this?
I think it's something you build up over time, too. Like, as a kid, I definitely would get burnt out over things I didn't like very quickly compared to now. I kind of find, what I've found that works for me is I try and find something in it that draws me to it, right? Like, at jobs I don't like, where I might not always have to pay attention, or I could just bury myself in a task. I like to go there and like, okay, I'm going to bury myself in a task today. And while I'm doing that, there are a couple things that, okay, maybe I'm in my head, I'm not things I have to figure out, right? Whether it be emotions or problems in the actual like physical world, I will occupy myself, my head, my brain with those thoughts or those problems while I'm doing certain tasks. That clarity that those moments can give me is that draw for me, right? To go back to work. And just creating little things like that has worked for me because I find it very hard to do things I'm not looking forward to. So just creating something I can look forward to, no matter how small, has been what's really worked for me. But there was one thing I wanted to ask you about, and how important during burnout and stress is it throughout the process, not just when you feel like crap, really, but is it to take, like, how important is it for you to just take a step back for a second, not really do anything, but just kind of like get your mind organized again? Because I feel like that's a lot of what stress is not having your bearings.
That's actually very important to me. Something I've been doing lately, I've been trying to learn how to meditate. As weird as it sounds.
Yeah, I've been trying to too.
Yeah, and
it takes a lot of focus.
It does. Normally when I go to the gym and I sit in the sauna, I'll sit in the sauna like 20 minutes after my workout. That's my time for meditation. It's very easy. It's a quiet place. You know, it's hot, so you're just really, I love thinking, so it really lets me kind of introspect and see what I'm doing, evaluate what I could be doing better. It's definitely my form of meditation, whether it's correct or not. I don't know if there is a correct way to meditate.
I think whatever brings you, I guess, the most
centered.
Quiet. Yeah, well, the most back to who you are.
Yeah. So that's super important to me. And also, my mom's been sending me these short videos. This lady, her name is, I forget her name, but she does these videos, or people like animate them on YouTube. And it's pretty much just like positive affirmations, but kind of learning how to say them to yourself, right? Like, I will be successful. I will make money. I will have a great family. I will have love. I will, instead of, it really helps with those positive thoughts, and it really centers you and brings you back to grounding. So that's something I've been working on and learning with. And I feel like that's really important for me for burnout and, this stress situation. It kind of calms you down, and it just makes you a lot more logical, I feel.
It puts you back in like a positive mindset.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of the weight off.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what makes you starting to meditate? Why are you starting that, and what have you noticed from that? Has that helped alleviate any of this? And I do, in the future, I would like to do a whole episode on this. I think it's something super important and we can all benefit from.
Meditation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, if you guys are interested in that, that would be really, really awesome.
I would enjoy
in the
that,
future. Yeah. So yeah, what are your benefits for it?
The biggest one for me is the ability to kind of not react based on my emotions. I think that's like the biggest benefit it's given me so far.
Okay.
Is that something can happen, and while it may, I guess, incite emotions inside of me, those emotions don't become my reaction. They don't become how I feel. I can disassociate myself from them enough to see the picture clear still.
Okay.
And I think that's what meditation has provided. That and like mental clarity throughout the day. Because sometimes I feel like when you get caught up in something, especially if you're looking at your phone, you can lose so much direction and like clarity on what you had to do in the process of your day or anything like that, right? And whatever you're focusing on in that moment. And I think meditation gives you the ability to kind of snap back into focus a little bit easier or a little bit quicker.
Okay, awesome. Now I'm going to get into signs of when you're experiencing a burnout. So the first sign is exhaustion, right? So this is fatigue that's going to present itself both mentally and physically, right? You might be tired earlier, mentally exhausted, right? You don't feel like having conversations with people. It's a lot harder for you to go out. It's a lot harder for you to go to school. That's kind of like the first sign, right? If you notice yourself being a lot more introverted and exhausted, overly tired, overly upset, overly sensitive, to a point where you're not used to it, that's definitely a first sign.
How important, on that note of like exhaustion and tiredness, how important is like basic self-care to all of this?
It's a huge part of it, right? Like, if you're not taking care of yourself, of course that's going to add to it, right? You're going to be you're giving yourself a disadvantage. If you're not eating healthy, if you're not working out, it's going to cause you a lot more tired, and it's going to cause a lot more distress on you.
In terms of that self-care, if that's not where, like if you are feeling stressed or burnt out or any of these things and you're not doing the basic things of 3 meals in a day, a good night's sleep, drink some water, and move around a little bit outside, once or twice a day, I feel like that's where you should start,
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of problems get solved just by taking care of the basic needs of yourself, like be well manicured, whatever makes you feel better about yourself, go do those things. Take time. It feels foolish in the moment sometimes, but at least from what I've experienced, those make the biggest difference.
So you would say, if you're starting to notice these first signs of exhaustion, you would say to kind of do those things, those little things, like you said, showering, eating, all these important things in your life to kind of help with this stress and this overwhelmness, to kind of alleviate and take some of this stress off your plate.
Yeah, like give yourself a second. Like for me, that's how I take my step back, right? Is like I do all these little things that slow your day down intentionally, right? Because in those moments you can kind of maybe not calm yourself down, but see things from a different point of view.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. The next sign of exhaustion is depersonalization. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is a feeling of indifference, right? So it pretty much means you're starting to feel numb. You're going to be a lot more cynical with your inner workings, or the lack of ability to communicate effectively with people, right? So you're kind of avoiding people, right? You're that super quiet person, in public when you're normally not. You don't want to talk. You don't want to think. You just want to kind of almost feel, yeah, exactly, feel numb. You don't really want to be there. That's definitely a big sign of, exhaustion, right? So that's another thing. When you're starting to recognize these things, it's very important to acknowledge them and confront them, right? So like I gave you guys that story in the beginning, right? My friend, he wasn't in the right place, so he called me. He called somebody, called a friend that he can rely on, and we talked it out. We were talking. We figured things out. Once you're kind of noticing these things, don't let it fester and kind of get bigger and worse. Talk about it, figure it out, and just don't ignore it. I think that's an important thing to say. Have you ever experienced depersonalization?
I think it kind of happens naturally a little bit as you get older. I feel like things start to not phase you as much. So I think a little bit of depersonalization, I feel like that's just part of growing up, but excessive depersonalization where nothing really kind of phases you anymore. I think I've definitely experienced that too. And you just, I think it all kind of goes back to taking a step back.
Yeah, I agree. The next sign of exhaustion is reduced personal accomplishment or performance, right? So this tends to manifest when you feel like your work is insufficient and you're incapable of performing. You may lose pleasure in work you've, previously, received praise for, or something where you've got a lot of pride in, but now you're not really, you just don't care about it. You're kind of like whatever. You may lose creativity, and this is also something that you can see lacking, and it can also become harder to concentrate, right? So it's kind of adding on to that depersonalization where you're kind of adding another layer to it, right? So it's getting even deeper than that. And that's kind of scary sometimes, right? I've totally been there. I've totally had those weeks where I'm like, this is terrible. I just want to crawl up in my bed and do nothing. And I think that kind of all ties together, right, with mental health, where you're overworked. Sometimes even it could relate with seasonal depression, regular depression. It can also be just because of stress or overworkedness. There's so many different factors that go into it, but it's something important to address no matter what. So the next thing we're going to get into is, what do you do when you're feeling these feelings of overwhelmness or being overworked? Are there any things you would say that you specifically do when you notice this, right? I feel like you're somebody that's super proactive. So when you start to notice yourself falling into this pattern, what do you do?
I mean, I did it today. I took a day, a little bit yesterday too. I've been feeling it a little bit. So I didn't, I normally write out what I have to do each day, and then like I allot certain time throughout the day for it. That way I don't forget, because I forget what I have to do very easily. Some days when I just feel like there's too much going on, I won't do anything. I have my responsibilities still. You have to do certain things. But outside of, the bare minimum some days, that,
Yeah.
just like this morning, I just kind of hung out.
Good.
And I feel better for it. And now I feel like, okay, I've rested. I want to go back and, do things now.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Maybe not today, but tomorrow.
Yes, and that's something so important, and I love that, right? You gave yourself that day, and now you're good, right? So tomorrow you'll get back into your swing of things, and you'll be good. Be honest with yourself, right? Recognize that you're burnt out, and you need to make a change. So another thing that you can do or implement, when you see this coming, make a change and make a plan to change, right? So don't only say you're going to make a change, right? So like you, for example, right? You said this week you noticed things were off, so you made, a plan to change, right? You said, okay, I'm going to give myself that day, but make that plan and actually put that plan into action, right? So whether it's for school, work, you need to tell your boss, like, hey, boss, look, like, I need off next Friday, whatever. You don't even have to give the reason why. You say you need off. Make a plan and put it into action so you can make sure that you're giving that stress or that overwhelmness a break. And then you can get back into your daily activities. Recognize that if your business isn't improving or if you're working so much, and you're burnt out, sometimes you have to step back, right? Sometimes we have to step back and analyze and almost disassociate in a sense, right? Where you can kind of look at it from a different perspective. This is also what I was talking to my buddy about a lot, actually. So he feels a lot of pressure when he has one unhappy customer, right? So let's say he's had 500 customers. 3 out of those 500 customers have been unhappy, right? So that's less than 0.5%, right? You figure it's
like 0.5%.
0.5% about.
0.75%.
Yeah, 0.6%, something like that. So less than 1% of people that you've done work for are unhappy, right?
It's pretty good.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on those 3 customers,
flip it around.
Exactly.
99 point whatever percent,
Look at that positive side of things, right? Kind of rephrase the way you think, because that's also important, right? When you're stressed, a lot of these negative thoughts tend to come to your head and it kind of piles on, right? So you're thinking and thinking and thinking. Change those negative thoughts to something positive. Make it where these thoughts are like I said, with that 500 people, if 3 of them are unhappy, 497 people are happy. Look at it like that. And, he was kind of saying, he's like, yeah, I get that, and he's like, but, it's important to me. He's like, I don't want anybody to be unhappy, which I completely understand too. You don't want anybody to be unhappy, but we live in a world where
it's borderline impossible.
Yeah, exactly. For even him to have only 3 unhappy customers, that's amazing.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, and that's the thing. Like, we're all very hard on ourselves. And sometimes we're our own reason for stress and anxiety and overwhelmness, right? So it's like, sometimes we have to give ourselves a little more credit than we give.
And so I think another thing, too, that ties in with that, in those times when you are stressed, you tend to, at least personally, I've noticed I tend to turn down compliments or favors or help of any kind, right? And sometimes that's just all you need is a little pick-me-up.
Oh, yeah.
From someone who's not you.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to pick yourself up, but we don't let other people help us out really too often, you know? And it can be very damaging to your pride sometimes, to let someone else be the solution, right? And not be the person to fix the problem.
Yes.
But I think that it's a really easy way to pull yourself out.
Yeah.
Is surrounding yourself with friends, family, whatever that good, group of people around you is that lifts you up.
Yeah, exactly.
In those moments.
Yep, 100%. Another way is find new ways to cope, whether it's, with your job, if you're the boss, if you're going to school, that work-life balance, right? Find ways to make amends with it and cope with it. So whether you're at work and you need to go take a 15-minute break, right? You go for a walk outside or something. That's something where you could learn how to relax, calm down, and yet again, like I said, center yourself, right? So it's kind of still retraining your brain to think differently and learn how to center yourself, ground yourself, and say, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I get to go home in a few hours, and I get to have that relaxation time. Another thing that you can add on to this work-life balance coping mechanism would be breathing techniques. Learn breathing techniques that are going to slow yourself down and really feel you're in the moment. That's another important thing that I was talking about with my friend. Realizing we're in the moment, right? He was saying to me his days fly by, right? He feels like he has 5 days inside of one day. Like I said, he works long hours. He's grinding all the time. But sometimes he's unappreciative of times that happen, right? Other than work. So we went out to lunch a few days ago, and he was just like, it was actually that same day that I saw him, that he came to my house earlier that day. We went out to lunch, and then later on in the day, he was like, dude, it feels like we went to lunch like 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, those are the times where you should be learning to separate the work and life, right? And this enjoyment. You should feel the opposite. Your work should feel like you did it 10 days ago, and this lunch should have felt like, it was 5 minutes ago. Appreciate those times where you are having enjoyment in life, right? Really be there in the moment and don't think about other things, because thinking about other things is giving ability and power to that stress. Stress is something that we create in our heads. When you give it power, it's going to have power over you. And this is kind of what I was trying to explain to him. If you're going to be negative and you're going to fuel those negative thoughts, they're going to take over you and they're going to win. I'm somebody who's super competitive, so I look at it as a game. I look at life as a game, right? I'm not going to let those thoughts win. I'm going to beat those thoughts. So I'm not going to let these negative thoughts come into my head and take over. Look, sometimes I lose the game, but I'll never lose the war, right? I'll lose a battle once in a while, but like I say, I'll never lose the war. It's something where you have to learn that the only things that have power in life are the things that you give power. He's somebody who is super money driven, which I am too, right? I want to work. I want to have a nice life. I want to be able to have a family where I could provide for them and, be able to have an amazing life. Something that people focus on so much, right? And look, this is coming from me. I'm somebody who focuses on money. I'm money driven, right? I want to be successful. As I go on, I'm learning more and more, like, the more stress and power you give something, the more it's going to stress you out, right? I have bills some months where it's like, oh my God, we've talked about this, but I've started to stop giving that power. I'm like, look, I'm going to have to...
It is what it is.
Exactly. Yes, it is what it is. So stop feeding into it. Stop giving it power. Another way to kind of combat this overwhelmness, this stress, is talking to someone, right? Find someone you can talk to and find someone you can be open with, right? Like I've suggested, somebody in professional help, and if you don't want to do that, like we've said, friends, family, somebody you trust. It doesn't have to be 3-4 people.
Somewhere where you don't have to hold back how you're feeling too.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
That's I think that can be difficult for people too, is when you feel like you have to hold back certain parts of yourself around other people, and then you feel worse, right, about yourself for no reason.
Yes. And me and my friend, I'm super real with him. Like, I don't sugarcoat anything. I was calling him out where he was wrong, and I was saying where he's not wrong, and not that he's wrong, like more where he was kind of blind to that observation. And that's something you also need. Like, I'm just going to be straight up with him. He's, I love this guy. He's one of my best friends, and, I'd do anything for him. So I don't want to hurt him, right, by sugarcoating things and telling him things only he wants to hear. I was real with him. In some situations it's harder than others, but in the end it was beneficial.
He probably had to swallow his pride to call you. right?
Oh, yeah.
And share those things, and then let you help him lift him up,
Yeah.
right? That probably wasn't a very easy thing for him to do. I mean, how is he now? Has he improved how he's feeling?
Oh, yeah, definitely. You know, we wound up getting lunch the next day together. We were kind of just talking about it a little more, made sure everything was okay. And he's like, yeah, I'm much better. You know, sometimes just to even get those thoughts out of your head is super important. Sometimes you need to talk to someone. You know, that's all. It's something that when we keep things in, it's hard because you're the only one that knows what's in your head. So sometimes when you let it out and talk to somebody about it, it makes them more real. And sometimes you have somebody else and you're like, no, you're good. Like, don't worry. It kind of humanizes you. It makes you more real. That's how I feel, at least. Can you describe a particular challenging project or situation you faced that has caused, you know, stress, overwhelmness, or any of the above?
Anything after 2020?
Yeah.
No, when like COVID was stressful too.
Yeah.
I feel like that's something everyone could kind of relate to.
Oh, yeah.
You know, whether or not you were personally affected by it is irrelevant, but just the whole time and the way things changed, and you know, that was a huge stressful time because no one really knew what was happening. And, you know, businesses were now closed, and, you know, the uncertainty of the way that everything worked, and then in a span of, you know, what felt like a couple days, everything was shut down.
Yeah.
And like that was stressful just because of the uncertainty of it.
And you had no control over it either.
Yeah. It's something so completely out of your control. And I think I at least I got through that point by just finding the things I could enjoy, you know?
Yeah, and I have one more question for you. How do you maintain a life-work balance, and how do you avoid becoming overwhelmed? You know, you specifically.
I try to do as much of what I like as much as possible, but I also understand what my responsibilities. So I try and take care of what I have to do first, right? Just day-to-day basis. I take care of what I feel like needs to be done first, right? Work-related. And then I try and do that with the goal in mind of, okay, I want to spend as much of my day as I can doing things I enjoy. And that most of the time still does include some form of work. I'd rather do something that feeds me and feeds my you know, my brain and like the appetite that I have for, I don't even know what you would call it, you know?
Yeah.
But just doing things that like genuinely, I guess, challenge me. In different ways, not the same thing every day.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. You know, and I just want to say something before we close out. My friend is someone who's not a super emotional person, right? At least on the outside. That just goes for everybody. Like, if you're not easy at communicating or you're not good at communicating, still call someone and try and get your feelings out. You know, he was even saying it was tough to talk about, whatever, but he was able to kind of get to the bottom of things, and whether it changed or not is one thing, but you were able to talk about it with someone and get another opinion to kind of either see that you're right in some things and see if you're wrong in some things. And like I said, it's just easy to kind of understand, like he realized that he was overwhelmed, and he realized, you know, this is stressful, and it is stressful, right? He's 19 running a really successful business by himself. There's not many 19-year-olds that are in the same boat, so it is lonely, it is stressful. There are people there for you that love you and that care, you know. Like I said, I'm a person who goes to bed super early. He came over my house at 12 o'clock, and, you know, we talked for 2.5, 3 hours just to kind of figure everything out. There are people out there that love you and that care and that will try and help you, that when you are in these stress situations or being overwhelmed or overworked, if you guys need to reach out to someone and you don't have anyone, reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to talk to you guys, help you guys out in any way we can. You know, we're not professionals with anything, but we'd love to help you guys in any way possible, even if it's just an ear you need to listen to. So without further ado, that is the end of the episode. I want to thank you guys again for all the support, love, and appreciation that you guys have been giving us. Please continue to share everything, like, all that good stuff. Thank you guys so much for listening, and don't forget to check out Dark Angel Company on Instagram at Dark Angel Co. and online at darkangelco.com. If you're interested in supporting and spreading awareness towards bringing light to a dark topic together, then tune in next time.